Let your mind drift now to a place far from the present. Imagine a hush falling over your thoughts as you step softly into the dim corridors of history. Tonight we'll drift along sun-bleached decks under the vast Caribbean sky, listening to the gentle creak of wooden beams and the slow lap of salt water against a ship's hull. Together we'll explore a world both rough and strangely beautiful, where men lived by the roll of the waves and the sharp edge of a cutlass. You might picture pirates as roaring brutes with flashing sabers, gold teeth, and a hearty laugh, but much of their lives was quieter, rougher, and weighed down by simple daily miseries. The romance of freedom on the high seas often masked a grim struggle to survive another day. Food spoiled under the tropical sun. Water turned foul. Skin blistered and split under the salt wind. So settle back, perhaps under a warm blanket, and allow your breathing to slow. Let these stories wash over you like gentle tides. Tonight we will wander through the hardships of an ordinary pirate's day, drift quietly through the final stand of Blackbeard himself, untangle old tailies of treasure, maps that never led anywhere at all, and finally step into the silken slippers of a pirate prince who ruled over Nassau with the elegance of a courtier. Close your eyes if you like and picture the glimmer of moonlight on endless water. We'll begin now, one soft step at a time. Imagine you have woken before dawn on a pirate ship, rocking in the warm Caribbean swells. The night has been restless. You lay cradled in a coarse hammock, its canvas damp from the heavy ocean air. The smell is a blend of sweat, mildew, and the faint sourness of salt and old wood. Around you, other hammocks sway gently, each with a pirate nestled inside, snoring or mumbling through uneasy dreams. As the first gray hint of daylight trickles through the hatch above, you pull yourself upright. Your back aches from the stiff hammock, your neck stiff where it pressed awkwardly against the ropes. You push aside the flap of the tar-streaked canvas that serves as a door and step into the cramped, low-ceilinged deck. The boards are slick. A rat skitters past your bare foot, disappearing into the shadows. Breakfast, such as it is, waits in a battered wooden bucket, a mash of boiled peas and a ship's a biscuit as hard as a brick, freckled with little black specks. You examine one closer. Weevils, tiny worms, burrow inside, the biscuit so stale and infested it seems to crawl on its own. But you're hungry. Everyone is. You knock the biscuit gently on the rail, hoping to dislodge the worst of the bugs, and take a cautious bite. It tastes of damp flour and dust. Nearby, the cook ladles out water from a barrel. It's warm with a faint oily sheen and carries the tang of algae. You drink carefully, trying not to breathe through your nose. This is life on a pirate ship, a daily negotiation with rot, thirst, and a stomach that never quite feels full. Above deck, the sky is turning a milky blue. The sails flap lazily overhead, heavy with dew. The air is thick and still. Somewhere far off you hear the thin cry of seabirds. As you lean against the rough railing, chewing your gritty mouthful, you wonder how long it will be before the next storm comes up without warning, and whether the ship will hold together when it does. Already a few men are hauling ropes, their shirts stained with sweat, voices low and tired. This is not the riotous life of legend. This is the slow grind of survival. And it is only the beginning of the day. By mid-morning, the sun stands high and bright, pouring its heat down upon the deck until the wooden planks seem to steam beneath your feet. The salt in the air crusts along your skin, mingling with sweat that trickles steadily down your neck and spine. You feel gritty all over, as though you've been rolled in sand. Work on the ship is relentless. The pirate captain, a broad man with a dark beard knotted into greasy strands, barks orders that echo across the deck. His voice is slow and gruff, more out of habit than anger, but there's an edge beneath it, a warning that even the smallest slip might earn you the lash. You join a line of men hauling a thick, tar-smelling rope, muscles straining as you pull in unison. The rigging groans above, the sails catching more of the soft breeze, and you catch glimpses of the canvas billowing out, pale and almost golden in the sunlight. A gull swoops low over the ship, its shadow flitting across your shoulder like a cold hand. Beside you, a younger sailor mutters a prayer under his breath. His knuckles are white on the rope. His wrists are chafed raw, fresh scabs, crumbling under the strain. You look down at your own hands and see the dark lines where the coarse rope has bitten into your skin, mingling with faint scars of old splinters. Once the rigging is secured, there's no rest. You're handed a bristle brush and sent to scrub the deck. The boards are stained with old fish guts and spots of something darker ground deep into the wood. As you work, your shoulders begin to burn, the sun beating on your back, sweat dripping from your brow onto the already wet planks. A faint breeze stirs now and then, carrying with it the breath of the sea, salt, rotting kelp, and something deeper and earthy that seems to rise from beneath the waves. Around you, the ship's bell clangs softly, marking the hours. Somewhere below deck, you can hear the faint scraping of a fiddle, a sailor idly playing to pass the time, the tune slow and almost mournful. It drifts up through the timbers like a ghost. You pause just for a moment to straighten your back and glance out across the endless blue. The horizon is so flat it might be a painting. No sign of another ship, no distant sails, only the sun's glare dancing on the waves. It's beautiful in a way that makes your chest ache, but it's also a reminder of just how far you are from any friendly port, from fresh food or clean water, from any comfort at all. The captain's voice cracks through the heavy air once more, and you bend again to your work. Here on this pirate ship, beauty and misery sail side by side, and the day still stretches long ahead. As the afternoon deepens, a heavier quiet settles over the ship. The sun, now past its highest point, glares down with a weary, oppressive heat that seems to flatten every sound. The men move more slowly, their steps dragging, shoulders slumped from both labor and the weight of the day's relentless glare. You're sent below deck to help with the stores. The moment you step off the sunlit deck, the world narrows into dim corridors where lanterns swing gently, their small flames casting trembling halos on the dark, sweating wood. The air here is close, heavy with the sour tang of salt pork gone just past the edge of spoiling. Barrels crowd the narrow passage, some leaking faint, sticky trails across the floorboards. You pry open a cask of salted beef. The meat inside is grayish and streaked with fat that looks almost blue in the gloom. A sharp, almost sweet stench rises up. You swallow against it. Beside you, another sailor digs his hand in, pulling free a chunk that drips brine. His expression is blank, resigned. This is supper, and there is no other choice. Farther along, you pass a stack of biscuit sacks, each one stamped with a faded seal. The cloth is thin in places, holes gnawed by rats. You nudge one gently with your boot and something inside shifts. A tiny squeak follows. The sailor next to you only shakes his head and moves on. Everyone knows the rats live as well as the men here, perhaps better. As you haul a barrel into position, your shoulders strain against its weight. The rough wood scrapes against your palms. Your breath comes hot and shallow, the confined air pressing on your chest. You pause, resting your forehead against the cool curve of the barrel, eyes closed. For a moment, you can almost hear your own heartbeat echoing back from the planks. Then a faint drip starts somewhere nearby, water seeping through a swollen seam in the hull. The ship always seems to be leaking a little, its timbers groaning with each slow roll. A few men mutter about it sometimes in hushed voices, worried that the next storm might do worse. When you finally climb back up the ladder, the daylight is almost blinding. You blink against it, your eyes watering, lungs gulping the fresher, salt-laced air. Even that harsh brightness feels like a small mercy after the thick gloom below. You wipe your hands on your trousers, leaving streaks of brine and grease behind. The deck rolls gently beneath your feet, the ship slipping over calm swells, the horizon beginning to melt into a soft haze. Another part of the day has passed. Still, evening is a long way off, and the work of survival aboard this pirate vessel never truly ends. Toward evening, the light shifts into something gentler, gold spilling across the deck in long, drowsy beams. The ship rocks softly on a mellow sea, sails catching a kind breeze that bellies them out in slow, graceful arcs. After the punishing heat of the afternoon, the cooler air feels like a balm, brushing over sunburned skin. It is in this hour that the ship feels almost peaceful. Some of the men lounge by the rail, shirts unlaced, letting the wind dry the sweat on their chests. One smokes a dark little pipe, the scent of burning leaf drifting lazily through the salt air. Another sits cross-legged, carefully sewing a tear in his sleeve with clumsy fingers and coarse thread. The cook emerges with a battered pan of something he calls stew, little more than salt beef boiled with ship as biscuit crumbs, and a handful of wilted onions. You accept your share in a wooden bowl. The broth is thin, the meat tough, but it's warm and hunger makes it almost pleasant. You sit with your back to a coil of rope, watching the sun hover near the horizon as you spoon the stew slowly into your mouth. Nearby, an older pirate hums a low tune. His voice is rough, worn by tobacco and years at sea, but the melody has a soft, almost tender shape. Others listen without speaking, heads bowed over their bowls, as if afraid to break the fragile calm that settled over the deck. Far out on the water, you glimpse dolphins cresting the waves, their sleek bodies flashing silver before they disappear again. A school of tiny fish leaps in a sudden sparkle, chased by something unseen below. For a heartbeat, the sea feels alive with secret motions and quiet stories you'll never quite know. But even in this gentler hour, the ship carries its threats. A faint stain of blood still darkens a corner of the deck, where days ago a man took the cat-o'-nine tails for theft. The ropes of that whip, studded with knots, left long welts that wept through his shirt. Such punishments come quick aboard a pirate ship, where discipline hangs by a thread and fear keeps order when gold cannot. As dusk finally deepens, lanterns are lit, their small flames bobbing like captive stars. The sky unfurls in a velvet canopy overhead. pricked by the first cold gleams of evening stars. You breathe in, tasting salt and the faint tang of tar. Another day has slipped by on this creaking, wandering world of wood and canvas. Tomorrow will be much the same, and for now you allow yourself to simply sit, legs stretched out, back pressed against the deck, as the ship sighs and sways beneath you, cradle and cage all at once. Now the night has deepened fully, draping its velvet weight over the vast expanse of sea and sky. A hush lies across the deck, broken only by the gentle slap of waves against the hull and the slow groan of timber adjusting to the rolling swells. Lanterns glow here and there, casting warm little circles that flutter with each passing breeze. In this dim stillness, we drift away from the ordinary pirate's grim routine to follow the shadow of a legend, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. His very name curls through history like smoke, dark and curling, more story than man to most who whisper it. But beneath the fearsome tailies was a living sailor with salt on his skin, boots damp from the same splashed decks, and breath that misted in the cool pre-dawn just like any other. Imagine him now, pacing the quarterdeck of his flagship, Queen Anne's Revenge, somewhere off the coast of Carolina. The ship rocks beneath his heavy stride, the rigging sighs overhead. The lamps swing on their hooks, sending pools of light sliding across the boards. His beard is thick and wiry, braided into coarse plaits tied off with bits of slow match cord, lengths of rope soaked in chemicals that burn with a crawling red glow. When lit, these cords wreathed his face in eerie smoke, giving him a look that was almost otherworldly. But in this quiet hour before battle, they are unlit, dangling dark against his broad chest. He carries pistols tucked into a wide sash, more than any reasonable man would trust to hold. The hilts knock against each other with a dull clink as he moves. A cutlass rests at his side, blade slightly curved, its edge freshly whetted. Even in stillness there is a simmering tension around him, a sense of a storm waiting its hour. Across the deck, his crew keeps a wary eye on their captain. They've seen what happens when his mood shifts, how quickly a bark of laughter can turn into a command that sends blood pooling on the planks. Yet they follow him without question. For all his violence, Blackbeard promises them spoils, adventure, and a terrible sort of freedom that few men on land will ever taste. Tonight, however, there is an unusual quiet. The stars overhead spill across the black sky in a sweep of pale dust, and the moon, nearly full, lays down a trembling silver path across the water. Somewhere far off, another ship waits, a trap laid by the governor of Virginia, eager to see Blackbeard's reign of terror finally broken. But here, for these last calm hours, he is simply a man aboard his ship, breathing in the salt night, feeling the gentle roll beneath his feet, and perhaps thinking of what morning might bring. The sea stretches out around him, endless and dark, a companion and a conspirator in all his crimes. And in this moment you can almost imagine that even Blackbeard himself feels a hush of wonder at its lonely beauty. Dawn comes quietly, bleeding pale gold and soft rose across the low horizon. The sea takes on a delicate shimmer, small waves catching the first light like scattered coins. On board Queen Anne's Revenge, the crew stirs to life under this gentle glow, but their movements carry a nervous sharpness. Today is not an ordinary day. Today they expect battle. Blackbeard stands near the helm, boots braced wide, his long coat stirring in the light breeze. Around him, the men prepare their weapons in a solemn, almost reverent hush. Pistols are checked and primed, powder flasks uncorked, cutlasses drawn an inch from their scabbards, then settled back with soft clicks. The smell of gun oil and the sharp tang of black powder rise into the morning air, mingling with salt and tar. Out on the water, two smaller sloops, commanded by Lieutenant Robert Maynard under the governor's orders, slip closer. Their sails are bright against the dawn, catching freshening wind. They look almost innocent in this new light, but each carries men armed and eager for the bounty promised on Blackbeard's head. Aboard the pirate ship, the atmosphere tightens. Blackbeard paces slowly, scanning the water with eyes narrowed beneath his tangled brows. Now he does light the slow matches twisted into his beard. Thin threads of smoke curl upward, drifting around his face, coiling like ghostly snakes. It is a sight meant to unnerve, to lend him the air of a demon sprung from some sailor's nightmare. He calls to his men, his voice deep and surprisingly calm, rolling across the deck with the easy authority of one who has stared down death many times before. They answer with short, rough shouts, their fear laced with excitement. The promise of plunder still shines bright enough to outpace the shadow of musket balls. The ships draw closer. From this distance you might imagine they move slowly, almost lazily across the brightening water. But on deck, every heart beats quicker. Fingers drum nervously on weapon hilts. A boy no older than 15, freckles dark against sunburned skin, crosses himself and mouths a silent prayer. Blackbeard watches them all, the faintest curve of a smile beneath the smoky ropes of his beard. Whether he feels triumph or foreboding, none can say. Only that the man seems alive in a way that is almost frightening, as if he draws energy from the danger itself, drinking it in like strong wine. Then the order goes out. Cannons are rolled into position, their wooden wheels creaking over the deck. Powder is rammed home, shot loaded. The gunners handle their charges with steady hands, though sweat beads at their temples. All around, the ship seems to draw a collective breath, the water slipping smoothly along her hull, waiting for the first thunder of iron. The battle begins with a single sharp crack, a musket fired from one of Maynard's sloops, its report echoing strangely across the open water. Almost at once the air fills with louder booms, cannon fire splitting the morning calm. Smoke blossoms in thick gray clouds, drifting lazily across the decks as if reluctant to leave. Aboard Queen Anne's Revenge, the deck jolts beneath your feet. The first volley sends splinters flying, sharp and hot, biting into exposed skin. Men shout, some ducking behind barrels or the thick masts, others rushing to return fire. The gunners lean into their work, faces set in grim lines, rammers moving in swift, practiced strokes. Then comes the deep roar of the pirate ship's own cannons, a rolling sound that seems to swell up from the very belly of the sea. Blackbeard stands near the quarterdeck rail, eyes locked on the enemy ships. Smoke swirls around him, carried by shifting gusts, clinging to his smoking beard so that he seems half swallowed by the battle's haze. His pistols are already drawn, one in each hand, barrels dark and glinting. The fight closes quickly. Maynard's lighter sloops dart in, sails flaring, grappling lines snaking through the air to bite into the pirate ship's rails. The lines tighten, ships lurch together. Pirates swarm to the sides, cutlasses flashing. The air is choked with powder smoke and the raw, salty tang of torn-up ocean. Boarding begins in a furious tangle of limbs, steel, and shouts. You watch as men clash in close quarters, blades ringing, pistols fired at near point-blank range. Blood slicks the deck in sudden, startling splashes dark against the sun-warmed wood. Through it all, Blackbeard moves like a man under a private spell. He fires one pistol, then another, each shot followed by a moment where he calmly tucks the empty weapon into his sash and draws yet another. A cutlass sweeps in at him from the side. He steps back just enough that the blade whistles harmlessly past, then responds with a powerful slash that sends his attacker staggering. But there is something eerie in his bearing, almost serene amid the chaos. Smoke rolls around him, drifting over the bodies that now litter the deck. Overhead, the rigging flutters, cut in places by stray shot, bits of canvas drifting down like dirty snow. And all the while, the sea sparkles beyond the railing, indifferent, bright and blue as if this slaughter were taking place on another world entirely. The sun has climbed higher, spilling down over the ships, gilding cannon barrels and wet decks, even the dark smear of blood. It seems a strangely gentle witness to so much violence. Still the fight rages, and Blackbeard shows no sign of yielding. For now the deck belongs to him and the men who have staked everything on his fearsome name. But already you sense the tide turning. More of Maynard's men press aboard with each passing breath, and the pirates, for all their ferocity, begin to fall back, step by ragged step. At last the battle tightens into a final brutal knot. The sun now sits high above, glaring down on a deck littered with splintered wood, dropped weapons, and the still forms of the fallen. The sharp scent of blood mingles with the lingering sting of gunpowder, the smoke drifting in ghostly ribbons over the tangled bodies. Blackbeard stands near the mainmast, breathing heavily, his broad chest rising and falling under his salt-stiff coat. His beard still smolders with dying strands of match cord, tiny red eyes winking in the smoky gray. Around him, only a handful of his men remain standing, backs pressed together, cutlasses and axes raised in trembling hands. Lieutenant Maynard's crew, though bloodied and shaken, closes in with grim purpose. They move carefully over the slick deck, muskets leveled, wary of the pirate captain who still holds his ground like a rooted oak. Close now, you can see the dark flecks on Blackbeard's face, powder burns, sweat cutting clean tracks through the soot, his eyes bright with something like feverish joy. Maynard himself steps forward, sword in hand. There's no shout, no grand declaration. The two men simply fall upon each other, steel meeting steel with a clash that rings through the tangled rigging. The fight is savage but strangely quiet, the grunts of effort and hiss of breath almost louder than the scrape of blades. Blackbeard lashes out with brutal strength, his cutlass arcing in deadly sweeps. Maynard blocks, steps back, thrusts. Around them, sailors watch with tight jaws, weapons ready but unwilling to intervene, as if drawn by the dark pull of seeing legend meet mortal end. A pistol shot cracks the air. Blackbeard fires nearly point blank. The ball tears through Maynard's coat, a shallow wound, not enough to slow him. Another stroke of Maynard's sword drives Blackbeard back against a blood-slick mast. For a breathless instant, the pirate captain's mouth opens, a silent snarl twisting through the thick smoke of his beard. Then Maynard steps in close, driving his blade deep. Blackbeard's body jerks once, a violent shudder running through him from boots to brow. His cutlass slips from nerveless fingers, clattering to the deck. Slowly, almost gently, he crumples down the mast to his knees. Smoke still curls up from the ropes tied in his beard, swirling around his head like a dark, fading crown. When at last he topples forward onto the deck, the men around him let out the breath they've been holding. The fight bleeds out of the pirates in an instant. Weapons drop, hands rise. Maynard's crew surges in, binding the surviving buccaneers. The deck falls strangely still. Only the slap of small waves against the hull and the distant cries of gulls intrude upon the heavy quiet. Somewhere, a loose length of rigging taps softly against the mast, a delicate counterpoint to all this grim silence. Blackbeard lies motionless where he fell, the sun catching on the sweat, still damp across his brow. His long reign of fear, thunder, and sea smoke has ended here, on sun-drenched planks washed in salt and blood. The ocean stretches away on all sides, bright and boundless, as if to whisper that it was never truly his to command. Now let us slip away from the violence of cutlasses and cannons, and turn instead to the quieter, curious tailies that bob like driftwood on the currents of time. It is evening again in our gentle voyage through history. The sea lies calm beneath a burnished sky, the horizon soft with lavender and fading rose. The deck of our imagined ship creaks underfoot, carrying us not to battle this time, but into the heart of one of piracy's most enduring myths, the treasure map. You might picture it instantly, a yellowed scrap of parchment, edges scorched, a bold X marking the very spot where chests overflow with golden doubloons and strands of pearls. A romantic notion, sweet to dreamers and poets. But for real pirates, the truth was far less generous to fancy. Most pirates never drew maps to hidden hoards. They spent their spoils quickly, on rum, on fine clothes, on small luxuries snatched before tomorrow's musket ball might end them. A pirate's treasure was often a pile of coin and trinket divided right there on deck. Right under the sun, each man's share handed over in the same hour it was stolen. Imagine a group of them now, gathered around a makeshift table, perhaps just a barrel with a stained cloth thrown over it. The purser sorts small piles of coins, the metal catching little glints of lantern light. A gold ring with a cracked emerald rolls from hand to hand. Someone laughs low, already thinking of the brothel it will pay for on the next port. There is no notion of burying such wealth beneath palm trees and scratching cryptic riddles into old goatskin. Still, stories of buried pirate gold wormed their way into sailors' yarns and tavern boasts. Perhaps it is because treasure is more thrilling if it is hidden. It invites us to dream, to hunt, to imagine unearthing secret fortunes from the quiet earth. Some say old captains like William Kidd did hide their loot, stowing it away on lonely islands under twisted trees. But for most pirates, time was too precious, the next raid too near, the next tavern door too tempting. So picture these men instead, pockets heavy, hearts light with reckless joy. A clatter of dice on a board, mugs raised in raucous toasts, the sharp scent of rum hanging in the close air. If there was any treasure map, it lived only in the bright flash of their smiles, the reckless gleam in sunburnt eyes, and the hush of surf curling up on distant shores where none would ever dig. And somewhere, perhaps sitting a little apart on an overturned cask, a pirate traces idle shapes in spilled ale, spinning whispered tailies of gold hidden deep in jungle caves. The others lean close, not quite believing, but not quite willing to abandon the dream. For in the dark hours between plunder and punishment, hope of hidden riches was a sweetness too rare to refuse. Let us drift a little deeper now, following the gentle pull of these old tailies through warm island breezes and over soft sands. Imagine yourself stepping ashore on one of those countless small Caribbean isles that pepper the turquoise sea like scattered emeralds. The sun is mellow, slanting through palm fronds, the trunks casting long striped shadows across the beach. Here, according to countless legends, pirates were said to have buried their treasures, heavy chests bound in rusted iron, overflowing with Spanish doubloons, silver candlesticks, and ropes of milky pearls. The very thought invites a small thrill. You might stand there, feeling the hot grains of sand sift between your toes, and half expect to see a corner of old wood poking from beneath a mound of fallen leaves. But the truth is stranger and sadder. Many of these islands bear no marks of buried wealth, only the subtle scars of pirate camps long vanished. A few blackened stones in a circle where fires once burned, shards of broken bottles glinting like dull gems in the underbrush. Perhaps a rusted knife blade half swallowed by the earth. Small, quiet traces of men who lived brightly for a moment, then disappeared into salt and legend. Archaeologists have sometimes dug where local stories promised treasure. Instead of gold, their spades turned up cooking pots, fish bones, and buttons from seacoats. In these simple things, a different kind of wealth emerges, a glimpse into the humbler side of pirate life. Meals of turtle stew bubbling over smoky fires, laughter shared around the flames, ragged men mending torn breeches with coarse thread, talking in low voices of the next voyage, or of a girl back in Port Royal who might still be waiting. And still, local guides will lead eager visitors along tangled jungle paths, pointing out lumps in the ground where treasure surely must lie. They tell tales passed down from grandfathers, of ghostly lights flitting through the trees at night, of whispering voices that drift up from the sand. These stories are tender things, held close not because they are true, but because they color the island nights with mystery. As you walk back toward the soft hush of waves, the scent of warm salt mixing with crushed leaves, you might smile at how willingly we all lean toward wonder. For in truth, the greatest treasure pirates left behind was not gold, but these gentle hauntings of the imagination, bright and weightless as the seabirds that wheel above, crying over the bright, endless water. Now let your mind wander even further, across calm seas toward older ports, where stories of pirate treasure grew tangled with whispers of curses and ancient magic. Imagine a quiet coastal village in the Caribbean at dusk. The narrow streets wind between low, whitewashed houses, lanterns flickering in doorways. Somewhere a woman sings a slow song as she sweeps her stoop, her voice rising and falling with a lilt that sounds almost like the sea. In the smoky corner of a small tavern, sailors crowd around a table, leaning close to hear an old man's tale. His skin is dark and lined like weathered leather, eyes bright under heavy lids. He speaks in a low, rhythmic voice, drawing them in with each careful word. He tells of Captain Benito, a Spanish privateer turned pirate, who once roamed these waters with a fast brig and a cruel smile. According to local legend, Benito captured a ship heavy with gold bound for Madrid, a fortune in coins, goblets, and crosses studded with gems. Fearing pursuit, he landed on an uncharted quay shrouded in thick mangroves, where he and his crew hauled the treasure deep inland. but greed twisted them. The crew fell to quarreling. Knives flashed in the dark beneath the trees, blood soaking into the tangled roots. When at last Benito stood alone, he buried the horde under a great twisted tree with bark black as night. Some say he whispered charms over the soil, dark prayers learned from old island shamans, to guard the spot with restless spirits. Years later, treasure hunters arrived. They hacked through vines, dug feverishly under the burning sun, and one by one they fell sick. Strange fevers gripped them. They raved of shadowy figures moving between the trees, of voices calling from the water. A few staggered back to the village, hollow-eyed and mumbling, only to die within days. The tavern grows quiet as the old man's voice drops to a hush. He leans closer, breath smelling of cloves and rum. Perhaps, he says, there never was any gold at all. Only the curse waiting to be woken by greedy hands. The sailors laugh, some uneasily, knocking their mugs together to break the spell. But later that night, as they walked back through the silent streets, they glanced toward the dark edge of the jungle with wary eyes. For stories, like the sea, have a way of creeping into your bones, filling your dreams with gentle dread. And so the myth of pirate treasure lingers, threaded through with hints of ghostly guardians and old island magic. It needs no chest of coins to make it gleam, only the hush of palm fronds in the night wind and the soft lap of water against a forgotten shore, whispering secrets no living soul may ever truly claim. As we sail onward through these drifting tailies, we find that even without curses or ghostly lights, the simple culture of pirate life held mysteries all its own. Imagine, for a time, stepping aboard a pirate ship, not as a prisoner or pressed sailor, but as a quiet observer, free to move through their floating world and witness its odd customs. Beneath the roar and bluster for which pirates were famed, there existed a strange, almost fragile fellowship. The articles of agreement, their shipboard laws, were read aloud to every new man who joined. By lantern light, with the sea murmuring against the hull, each pirate would stand in turn and swear to rules that governed everything from the division of plunder to compensation for wounds. A missing leg might earn a man 600 or 700 pieces of 8, a lost eye perhaps 100 more. In this brutal floating world, such small certainties were a kind of solace. On certain nights, the deck transformed into something near to celebration. Picture lanterns strung along the rigging, their yellow glow dancing over faces, rough with stubble and salt. A fiddler might scrape out a lively tune, joined by a drummer beating a hollow rhythm on an overturned cask. Barefoot sailors would stamp and whirl in uneven dances, laughter rising up into the warm darkness. Even hardened cutthroats could not resist the pull of a jig when the moon rode high and bright. Superstitions wove through their days like faint threads of silver. A quiet whistle was frowned upon. It was said to tempt the wind to grow wild and tear at the sails. Killing a seabird brought even graver fear, for albatrosses and gulls were thought to carry the souls of dead sailors. You might see a pirate pause at the rail, head bowed, watching such a bird wheel overhead with something close to reverence. In the cramped hold, small tokens tucked into hammocks told of simpler devotions. A scrap of ribbon from a girl in Port Royal, a tiny wooden carving of a saint, a bit of bright cloth tied to a beam for luck. Even the roughest marauder carried these fragile hopes close to his heart. So much of pirate life was spent waiting for the wind to shift, for a sail to rise on the horizon, for the next harsh order to call men to arms. In those long spaces of quiet, they built a strange community afloat on leagues of empty sea. Men who might slit each other's throats over a spilled drink in port would stand shoulder to shoulder when the cannon spoke, bound together by the delicate thread of shared danger. As night gathers again around our gentle voyage, you can almost hear their low voices drifting across the deck, telling stories to keep fear at bay. Not just of gold and conquest, but of small wonders, the glitter of plankton under the bow, the hush of dolphins racing alongside in moonlit water, the tender dream of returning home, someday, somehow, if fortune allowed. And in this way, even pirates, so feared and reviled, revealed themselves as men adrift in mystery, chasing not only treasure, but a fleeting taste of wonder upon the wide, indifferent sea. Now let us slip into yet another fold of this pirate tapestry, where life was painted not in grime and hunger, but in silk and candlelight. Imagine, if you will, the bustling harbor of Nassau in the early 1700s, a tropical thieves' paradise under a sun that gilds every rooftop and shimmers across gentle, sheltered waters. It is here we find a most curious contrast to the salt-worn pirate scrambling up rigging for weeviled biscuit. For Nassau, at its riotous height, was a place where pirate captains sometimes lived like gentlemen, striding ashore in brocade waistcoats and powdered wigs, boots polished bright, rings glittering on every finger. Picture a grand house overlooking the harbor, white walls half hidden by flowering vines, broad verandas hung with hammocks and gaudy drapes that flutter in the sea breeze. On such a veranda stands a man known in whispers as the pirate prince of Nassau, Charles Vane, perhaps, or another bold rogue who for a brief spell commanded both fear and envy. He lifts a delicate goblet of dark red wine, swirling it lazily. Around him gather other pirate elites, men who days ago might have been hacking down Spanish sailors on a burning deck, now laughing over delicate plates of sugared fruits and roasted game. Servants, some freed slaves who chose this peculiar, dangerous society over the rigid cruelty of plantation life, move quietly between tables, refilling glasses, bearing trays heavy with imported cheeses and sweetmeats. Music drifts from inside the house, a small group of musicians coaxing out a bright reel on fiddle and pipe. Beyond the veranda's carved balustrade lies the turquoise harbor, crowded with ships bearing sails of every shape and color. Longboats shuttle to and fro, ferrying casks of Madeira, bolts of bright silk, even crates of books for pirate patrons who fancied themselves philosophers after a cup or two. Here, pirate captains cut deals in murmured tones, signing crude treaties on scraps of parchment. They plotted the next voyage as easily as another toast, dividing up seas on a rough map spread across a table sticky with spilled wine. And yet there is laughter too, boisterous and unrestrained, for in Nassau, for a fleeting golden moment, they believed themselves kings. It was a fragile grandeur. The same men who today lounged on embroidered cushions would tomorrow be back on their decks, pistols loaded, eyes squinting into spray. But for now, under lanterns strung between palm trees and perfumed by blossoms that opened only at night, they reveled in a stolen nobility. In this unlikely court by the sea, pirates lived out their own vivid parody of high society. And though it would not last, though British warships would soon anchor off Nassau's warm shores to sweep this wild revelry away, for a brief span under moonlight and laughter they were sovereigns of their own bright, reckless world. As night deepens over Nassau, the pirate court grows ever more extravagant. The veranda now overflows with lanterns, each one a small globe of warm light swaying gently in the sea breeze. Their glow spills across polished tables laden with half-emptied bottles of claret and rum, platters picked clean of roasted fowl, and bowls still heaped with tropical fruits whose bright skins gleam like scattered jewels. Inside the house, the music has grown livelier. A trio of musicians stands near a grand archway, coaxing quick, laughing melodies from fiddle and flute. Velvet drapes flutter at their backs, revealing glimpses of rooms lined with gilded mirrors, and crowded with mismatched furniture, some stolen from merchant ships, others bought at scandalous prices from desperate traders. Here, pirate lords and their closest confederates dance with surprising grace. Boots that only days ago trod blood-slick decks now glide across polished wooden floors. One captain, stout and heavily scarred, bows low with a flourish of his plumed hat before taking a lady's hand, a merchant's widow perhaps, or the daughter of a tavern keeper, lured by silk gowns and whispered promises. They spin together, her laughter trailing behind like a silver ribbon. Elsewhere, small knots of conspirators recline on plush cushions, speaking in hushed voices over the clink of cut glass. They bargain not for simple coin, but for entire ships, shares in future raids, or secret information brought by informants who slip like shadows through Nassau's crooked streets. A whispered warning of a Spanish galleon's course might fetch as much as a chest of pearls. Yet even amid these plots there is room for sheer indulgence. A pirate, his coat aglitter with stolen brooch, lounges near an open window, eyes half closed, as a servant fans him with a palm frond. Another sprawls on a couch draped with silks, puffing contentedly on a long clay pipe that scents the air with spicy tobacco. Beyond the house, the harbor lies hushed beneath the stars, ships bobbing at anchor with lanterns glowing along their rails like tiny constellations. The water laps gently at hulls smeared with barnacles and salt. Somewhere far off a lone gull cries, its voice strangely forlorn in the warm darkness. In these moments, Nassau feels like a dream, but balanced on a breath, a dazzling, decadent world built on plunder, fragile as the thin crystal goblets that now lie cracked and empty on the tables. For tonight, at least, the pirates are content to live as nobles might, draped in velvet and jeweled rings, trading stories as though tomorrow's gallows could never find them. Here, beneath paper lanterns and tangled jasmine vines, the thieves' republic shines in its brief, improbable glory, a stolen court under foreign stars dancing at the very edge of the known world. Later in the night, the revelry softens. The bright laughter and clamor of clinking goblets give way to a mellower hum of voices, low and lingering like the hush of surf against distant sandbars. A warm breeze meanders through the veranda, stirring the heavy scents of wax, spilled wine, crushed blossoms, and salt that hangs always at the edge of every breath. Here, on a broad, cushioned bench set back in the shadows, a pirate lord reclines with two of his most trusted mates. His brocaded waistcoat lies unbuttoned, revealing a throat still beaded with sweat. A fine lace cuff, frayed at the edges, droops into a goblet half full of amber brandy. Yet he pays it no mind. His eyes are distant, fixed on the night sky where strange new constellations drift slowly westward. They speak not of the next prize or the weight of a Spanish merchant's cargo, but of softer things. One wonders aloud whether he'll ever see Devon again. The rolling green hills, the hedgerows sweet with hawthorn. Another talks of a woman in Tortuga who once promised to wait for him. His voice breaks a little, though he tries to hide it with a crooked smile. Their captain only listens, idly turning a small pendant between his thumb and forefinger, a plain locket tarnished by salt air. Perhaps inside is a lock of hair, a tiny miniature, some memory of a life before all this. Or perhaps it is empty, held close simply for the comfort of weight against his heart. Nearby, a pair of musicians has set aside their lively reels for gentler tunes. A slow, lilting melody floats through the warm night, catching on every leaf and rafter. It weaves around the listening pirates, drawing sighs from men who days ago showed no mercy on the deck of a captured frigate. The harbor beyond lies cloaked in darkness now, save for the scattered glow of lanterns bobbing on anchored ships. Their reflections stretch out over the black water in trembling gold ribbons. Somewhere far off, a bell tolls from a ship's mast, marking the quiet hour. The pirate lord lifts his goblet in a silent toast to the darkness. His mates do the same. No words are spoken, for none are needed. Each man understands the fragility of this borrowed peace, how quickly it might shatter with the crack of a cannon or the shout of king's men on the quay. So they savor it. They sit close under the rustle of palm fronds, drink in hand the world for this moment, their own, bright with whispered confessions and soft laughter that mingles with the music and drifts out over the dark, gentle sea. Here, for a slender breath of time, the pirate prince and his band are not thieves or hunted men, but simply souls at rest beneath a canopy of southern stars. As the night slips toward its quietest hour, the grand house in Nassau begins to empty. The lanterns burn lower, their flames dwindling to soft orange nubs that throw long, languid shadows across the tiled veranda. Servants move about with practiced calm, gathering empty goblets, brushing crumbs from embroidered table runners, snuffing out candles one by one. The pirates linger, reluctant to break the fragile spell. A few sit clustered on cushioned benches, heads bowed close in private murmurs, while others lean against carved columns, gazing out at the harbor with thoughtful eyes. The laughter has faded into gentle, almost tender conversations, voices carrying in low murmurs across the cooling air. On the far edge of the veranda, the pirate prince himself stands alone, one hand resting on the balustrade. The fine lace at his wrist flutters faintly. His coat, richly dyed and embroidered with thread that catches even the weakest light, looks almost too fine for such rough shoulders. The night breeze lifts his hair, heavy now with sweat and the faint perfume of the flowering vines that snake along the rail. Below, the harbor lies still, masts rising like a dark forest against the starlit sea. Lanterns sway from rigging, casting sleepy reflections that shiver across the water. Somewhere a small boat rocks against a pier, its ropes groaning in a soft, intermittent chorus. Perhaps in this moment the pirate prince allows himself a rare honesty to dream not of gold or captured galleons, but of quieter shores, of a cottage in some green country, far from salt and gunpowder, where morning mist settles over fields, and the only cries are those of waking birds. His fingers tap idly on the wooden rail, as though keeping time with a melody only he can hear. Behind him, the last of the guests begin to drift away, their laughter now a hushed memory. A pair of young pirates slip down the veranda steps, boots scuffing on the gravel path, arms draped over each other's shoulders in easy camaraderie. They vanish into the warm darkness, bound for hammocks aboard some creaking brig. The pirate prince remains a little longer. He closes his eyes, breathes in deeply, the scent of salt, of jasmine, of wax and dying embers. It is a perfume unique to this stolen world, as fleeting as the republic they've built here on borrowed land. At last, with a small sigh, he pushes away from the rail and turns back toward the dim interior. His footfalls fade into the house, swallowed by shadows and silence. On the veranda, only the faint rustle of leaves and the soft lap of water remain. So ends another night in Nassau, where pirates donned the trappings of kings, feasted beneath lanterns like nobles, and dreamed, if only for a breath, of lives far removed from cannon fire and storm-tossed decks. By dawn, their ships will stir again, sails rising against the pale sky, and the delicate masquerade will slip away, leaving only the sea and the long, patient memory of the wind. Now the long journey through these soft, shadowed passages of pirate history draws to a gentle close. The sea, which has carried us from grimy hammocks and salted meat to moonlit verandas heavy with stolen silk, lies calm beneath a sky grown pale with the first breath of dawn. Stars fade one by one, retreating before the quiet promise of morning. In this softened hour, you might imagine walking alone along the deck of some old brigantine at anchor. The boards are cool beneath your bare feet, damp with dew, creaking softly under your weight. Above, the rigging hangs still, dark lines traced against a lightning sky. A faint breeze stirs, carrying the scent of salt and far-off blossoms. It rustles gently through your hair, as tender as a lullaby. Think back on all we have drifted through together. The harsh clatter of dice on a pirate deck, the tense hush before Blackbeard's final charge, the delicate intrigue of Nassau's lantern-lit feasts. Remember the ghost stories whispered over cups of rum, and the small superstitions that made even the roughest marauder pause and touch a lucky charm. These are the quieter heartbeats of history, beating beneath louder cannons and shouted threats. For all their fearsome legends, pirates were bound by many of the same frail hopes that tug at any soul, the wish for comfort, for fleeting beauty, for some taste of freedom beyond the reach of law or fate. Their world was harsh and brief, yet it was also alive with wonder. The silver leap of dolphins alongside a prow, the hush of starlight on dark water, the tender weight of a locket carried close to the skin. As the sun lifts gently above the horizon, spilling soft gold across the endless ocean, take a slow breath and let these stories settle. Let them drift and fade like distant sails disappearing over the rim of the sea. The pirates are long gone, their laughter and cruelty, their revels and regrets all now woven into the great hush of history. What remains is a calm sea, a brightening sky, and a lingering sweetness of old, half-whispered dreams. So rest here a while, cradled by the soft murmur of waves, the memory of lanterns swaying in tropical air, and the timeless lullaby of the wind over the wide, forgiving water.